With us taking that work off of the college, they can just primarily focus on securing placement. So I think it's a beautiful partnership that we have.
How can a set of skills lead you down the path to success? That's what we're setting out to answer on the Edup Canada podcast. I'm your host, Michael Sangster. Join me as we unpack how leaders around the world have taken training and skills and turned that into a lasting career. Now let's learn together. Welcome back to the Edup Canada podcast. I'm Michael Sangster, your host, and I'm joined today by a couple of friends of mine who've become friends as they joined us as platinum sponsors of the National Association of Career Colleges. Vasco and Krystin from Extendicare and their sub-company Placement Pass that we've been doing a bunch of work with. But I wanted to have them on today because they're talking with our colleges about a lot of things around privacy and healthcare information. I'm going to lean into you two to introduce yourself for a minute. Have a little fun today. We like to keep this light and loose, but we do want to talk about some of the things that you're doing with our colleges and some of the things you've seen around long-term care, especially in Ontario. So Vasco, why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll go to you, Krystin.
Thanks, Michael. I'm Vasco Alcantara. I'm the Director of Engagement and Partnerships for Placement Path. Unfortunately, I am the face of the site because I'm the first person people see.
And my name's Krystin. I wear a few different hats within Extendicare and help out on various lines of business. Aside from keeping Vasco in line, my main role is the clinical manager at Placement Pass. So I oversee the clinical division of our business, like the nursing team, manage relationships with our client colleges, and just ensure everything is running smoothly from a regulatory and compliance standpoint.
So 95% of the job is keeping an eye on Vasco. 5% is what you have to get done, which is really a full work day, but you got to get it done after dealing with Vasco, correct?
Yeah, exactly. You got it.
That's understood. Talk to me about what you mean when you say the clinical practice. Explain to our listeners today, some of which are career colleges, some are students, the importance of what Placement Pass does.
So basically, we're nationwide. So we have colleges with students all across Canada, and every regulatory body for each province is slightly different. So it's very helpful for the college to have basically one central point where you can go to. We're very familiar with the requirements in all the provinces. And so just being able to rely on us for regulations, best practice, and basically industry standard within that province is very helpful for the colleges.
But what you're doing, let's get down to the basics here. Maybe Vasco jump in. What is it the doing that you're doing for these colleges?
Well, right now, most post-secondary institutions are clearing the students themselves.
What do you say clear? Dumb it down for Mike.
All right. So when a student is going to go to a placement, they have to submit medical and non-medical documentation to ensure that they're cleared or those documents are validated and ready to go to placement. Right now, that process is being done at the post-secondary level by the schools themselves. And what that does is that means the school is assuming all the risk and all the liability that their person that is looking at these documents and validating them knows exactly what they're looking at. Most schools actually don't have the right people validating those documents. They usually use coordinators or advisors to look at those documents, not medical professionals as is required by, number one, by law. You should be looking at it with a medical view. That's why with Placement Pass, we only use nurses. We have a chief medical officer, a chief nursing executive. Krystin herself is a nurse. They're the only people that actually look at and validate those documents.
Obviously, you work with all levels of post-secondary education to make sure that institutions, it's not just the career college sector, are living up to the obligations of privacy and healthcare acts across Canada, correct?
Correct. Like these days with the governments, both provincial and federal governments, the privacy officers of all these levels of government are very, very strict on what is allowed and what isn't allowed. Most post-secondary institutions do not meet the minimum requirements of either PIPA or FIPA or whatever mandates are in place or legal requirements are being asked for privacy.
It's an interesting perspective. I was talking to some of our members on Friday preparing for this interview today, and we've also got a lot of institutions that have full-time nurses on board that do this work for them as well. So it's a matter of educating the ones that might not be aware, and you're doing that, as I mentioned earlier, across all levels of post-secondary education to make sure the needs are met. Krystin, talk to me about a day. What's a day look like for you when working in this kind of world?
So basically, it's the nurses that do the heavy lifting. They do basically the day-to-day review and validation of all of the documents that come through the portal. But in terms of my role, so anything that requires something out of the norm. So for example, a student now submits a medical exemption. That will go to me, and then I'll review that. I have to determine if that note, first of all, is not a fraudulent document. So part of what we do is detect fraud. So I'll review that. If it requires follow-up or a phone to the doctor's office where that came from, I'll do that as well. And then I review the content of the letter itself just to make sure that it includes all of the points that we look for. And then if appropriate, I'll make the call on, yes, we can accept this, assign the medical exemption to the student. And then now I flip back over to the college and work with them to make sure that this medical exemption meets their facility requirement as well.
How often are you seeing fraud? We're seeing an increase across our sector. Actually, we wonder if it's an increase or we're just getting better at capturing it now. Friday dealt with the police department around a claim with a student who claimed to be a graduate of our institution, one of our institutions, and we were able to go back to the police and prove they weren't. How much fraud are you seeing in medical records?
Yeah, so we see a lot with TB testing. And I think that's because some facilities require that every 6 months. Most are every 12 months. But it is a tricky one to do because there's a lot of doctor's visits that are involved. Because if you're doing a 2-step TB, that's 4 doctor's visits. If you're doing a 1-step, that's still 2 doctor's visits. And it's very time specific. There's certain timelines you have to follow in order for that test to be valid. And students, they're busy. They might not start when they should. And so I think sometimes when it comes down to, okay, I got to go to placement, they might, be feeling that pressure. And that's when I feel they might alter some documents to try to hit that timeline to be able to go to placement in time. So we're definitely seeing an increase in that. And vulnerable sector checks, we're seeing an increase in those as well.
Really? Because I find that vulnerable sector checks are fairly easy to do now. The police have automated a lot of that process to make it easier, but you're still seeing that.
Yeah, so there's still quite a long wait time, and certain programs, their VSC can't be dated before a certain date. So in order, again, to meet that deadline, if they've waited too long, we find that they're altering the dates. Some students will alter the results of the police check, but that's not as common.
That's interesting. I would assume also the pressure of getting into a doctor's office or getting into a clinic these days, we all face that challenge. We don't have a doctor, could also lead to some of these issues around fraud.
Definitely. Yeah.
The student has a deadline to get everything prepared and ready to go. And that puts unique challenges on individuals that are looking to study. So Vasco, talk to me a little bit about your work. What do you enjoy? What do you don't like? What's driving you to be so passionate about paramed and placement class?
I like finding a problem and, finding a solution. For us, the landscape environment right now in Canada is a very, very difficult one for post-secondary institutions. And building relationships with those schools and trying to find them avenues to save money while still ensuring the highest quality of document validation, to me, that's a joy. I get up in the morning, I know it's going to be a challenging day and I enjoy the challenge. But with Placement Pass, post-secondary institutions have the ability to save a lot of administrative costs on their end while transferring a lot of that risk and liability over to us because we're very good at it. You had mentioned, Michael, that several of your colleges, of your members, have a nurse on staff to validate these documents. Well, there is a cost associated with keeping that nurse on the payroll just to look at documents. If that nurse was able to actually teach a PSW course or do something else, that's a revenue stream that your members could focus on rather than spending whatever amount it is to clear a document. And Krystin's nurses are so good at it that they can probably clear or validate documents for twice as many, sometimes 3 times as many students in the same time period as the nurses at the college levels are doing.
I'm not trying to make this sound like an advertisement, but you guys have got, if I'm correct, over 2,000 nurses working for you across Canada. Is that the right number?
We have access because our parent company is Extendicare. We have access to up to 2,000 nurses to assist us.
So when you have peak periods and you're not a new company, you've been around for a while.
A long, long time. Placement Pass itself has been around for over 15 years now, and we've cleared and validated the documentation of over 300,000 students.
Talk to me a little bit about Extendicare, because you've got another connection here too, of another interest in the long-term care area. And I should point out, you're not just focused on long-term care, but the PSW training is the one that our members are doing so much work with you.
Well, of course, if your members don't know, or the people that are on this podcast, Extendicare is Canada's largest long-term care and home care provider. They have several divisions underneath them. Extendicare is the big company, Revera, Access Health, Paramed is our home care. So the big focus for us is the PSW programs and everything like that for the purposes of placing students within our own organizations and that. But Placement Pass itself can validate the documentation for any program that requires a student to go to placement. So we can do ECA, we can do food services, we can do any legal programs, police studies, it doesn't matter. If the student requires their documents to be validated for placement, Krystin's nurses have the ability and the skill to do that in the shortest period of time possible.
You should put that word right in your corporate name, placement. That'd be good. I think you should think about that from a marketing perspective.
I think it would be a great idea. I think my wife would be against that, but we'll see.
Well, putting the word placement right in the company name? Not the word Vasco, the word placement.
I think she'd like Vasco instead. But yeah, placement, we'll see what we can do.
I think I'd leave the word placement pass in there. I didn't realize the extent of how many other programs. It makes sense, though, once you're up and running. Krystin, give me a little bit more background as to the process. I know you've automated it in many cases for colleges where they can set up their own portal where a student can come in, or the college can come in and load up the information. How is it protected? Because privacy is such a crucial part of what's going on. We're working with you because there's a need for privacy of the information, who looks at it. But you've also got to worry about the privacy of how it's protected inside your system, correct?
Yes, that's also a Vasco question, though.
We'll go back to Vasco then.
All right. Well, the dedicated portal, like each one of the post-secondary institutions we have, has their own specific URL. So only their students will upload documents via the portal. For security and ensuring that everything is kept safe and everything like that, no document ever leaves Canada. So all of our servers are kept here in Canada, and in our case, here in Toronto. All those documents are only looked at by Krystin and her nurses, or our chief medical officer, chief nursing executive. At no time, for example, will I ever look at a health document because I have no access to it. So we ensure with our quality risk assessment teams that we follow the highest standard of privacy and document security in Canada. We have to. We're a health company. We have to do it for our patients. We have to do it for our staff. And we definitely do it for the colleges and the universities we work with.
We'll come back to you guys and day-to-day work, but let's jump back to you, Krystin. One thing, we asked 2 questions, so we're going to split them up today, but we may even add a little bit here. Krystin, talk to me a little bit about a skill set that you believe has made you successful, or one you thought you were better at. We're trying to talk to students on this podcast as well, and our average learner is in their 30s. They're not right out of high school coming into a career college. They're taking a second chance at a new career. And I always find it interesting to talk to successful people and find out what you think has made you successful. And did you learn it early, or did you have that skill set?
So I think a skill that's made me successful, I learned it kind of on the job. So I would say organizational leadership. So specifically the ability to manage multiple moving parts within the clinical operations. So whether that's coordinating with nursing staff, aligning with client colleges, or just ensuring that we're meeting the evolving provincial regulations, it's just critical that I'm able to keep everything on track while maintaining the quality and compliance for the company. So again, that's a skill that I had to develop in this role just because it's so essential in this fast-paced, high-stakes environment like placement pass.
The reason I like to ask this question is it's not about education every day. Sometimes it's about things we learn on the job. And it kind of comes back to you guys with placement pass, because that placement, that time you spend with people who already do the job is so crucial in our career college sector. So that's something you learned on the job, right?
Yep.
Because out of necessity, you forced yourself to get better organized.
Exactly. Yeah. And just hone in on like those leadership skills. Like we all have that within ourselves. We just need something kind of to bring it out of us. So I feel like in this role, I was really able to tap in to all my leadership qualities. It just comes out naturally. Like, some jobs when they say, oh, you're like Vasco, you're so good. You're a people person. When you put Vasco, say, on a podcast, that natural, chattiness of him, we like to make fun of him that he doesn't stop talking, but, it taps into that skill. So I think we all have these qualities within us. And then it's just a matter of finding that role, that job, that position that kind of brings your natural strengths out of you.
That's a really interesting perspective. So we're going to throw it to you, Vasco, because we ask the question, we talk about mentors, because the other part, we go back to the college sectors, is that mentoring that happens in the classroom, happens on placement, happens in our lives. I think it's so important we take a moment and talk about it. We just issued our Mentor Monday report for this week. Every Monday morning, we're recording this on a Monday. We put one out every Monday morning of one of these little snippets of someone's story. And this morning's one was talking about an individual, that Stuart Bentley, who didn't have a mentor. He kind of had to do it his own way. So now he's trying really hard to be mentors for the team that he's around. And I know he's good at it. So talk to me a little bit about a mentor in your life and what that meant for you.
Well, I've had a long and very varied career, but several years back, I got to meet a wonderful gentleman called Rick Hansen. Rick Hansen, back in the 80s, for those of you that don't know, did the Men in Motion tour. And he traveled the world in a mobility device to bring an understanding that persons with disabilities shouldn't be overlooked, and that the built environment, or the environment that everyone lives and works in, should be adaptable to every person, regardless of whether they're a person with a disability or not. And to me, when I got a chance to come work for the foundation at the time, I got to see how much work he does on a regular basis, how much he enjoys the challenge of battling the inadequacies for persons with disabilities. And to me, that was just a reinforcement of everything that I've always worked for. It was like, I liked the challenge, and I like to find ways to fix these problems and overcome those challenges. And working with Rick for several years, there's no quit. There's no challenge that he wouldn't try to tackle. And there's no person he wouldn't talk to try to make things better. To me, that was a great opportunity and a great mentor to work with.
Do you think he knows you were a mentor? He was a mentor to you?
We had several conversations, and he's like, look, I know, he always said the work that I do is just as valuable as the work that he does. He never took any credit for the work that the foundation did. He just said, look, he was happy to be a part of it to try to overcome a problem. But those problems cannot be overcome by one person alone. It has to be, it's the old theory that one person doesn't raise a child, it takes a village. It's the same with problems. I look at our team at Placement Pass, I'm like, I'm out there building those relationships, trying to overcome these problems, but I can't fix them alone. I require Krystin and our team on the back end to help with all the concerns and the issues and the support that we offer all our schools.
So it's a great perspective of it. It is always a team. People who use the word I have no interest in working with. You need to be all about the team and how you develop each other and develop the skill set of the people around you. So come back to you, Krystin, for a little bit more about Placement Pass and what you're doing. Talk to our listeners a little bit about the data you look at, because there is a reason why only a nurse should look at that data, correct?
Yeah. So in terms of data, essentially that would just be all the documents that the students are uploading to our portal. And most of those, I would say 90% of those, are medical documents. So you can't just have any old person looking at it. It's basically on a need to know basis. So even if the student says, I don't care if, my teacher sees my measles vaccination from when I was a baby. That's great, but we have to follow the guidelines set out that say that only certain people should be looking at it. So just the nursing team's going to be reviewing that. I don't even go in unless I have a reason to go in. So if a nurse passes it to me and says, I'm not sure about this document, can we accept it for whatever reason? That's when I would go in. So there's layers of protection for all of those documents. Even we have an IT person, our portal application specialist, and she will go in only as needed if there's a technical issue. It's the only time she's going to go in. Certain people never have a reason to go in, like Vasco. So we don't let Vasco look at anything.
That's probably just generally a good idea to keep Vasco out of it. We're all having a good chuckle here today. Before we sign off, Vasco, anything else that you'd like to add about Placement Pass, Extended Care, the whole group, what you're doing and your partnership with NAC?
Well, we really enjoy our partnership with NAC. It's always a great opportunity to bounce ideas off of, the NAC team and the members and everything. And we really love the fact that we're able to help some of your members to streamline their operations, do all the things that they normally would do without having to do it in-house. We like doing it ourselves. It saves filing cabinets, it saves hours, it saves time, it saves, 7 years of storage. That's what I always used to say. So we really, really enjoy our discussions, whether we hear something or whether you hear something. It's always important that information sharing of what we hear goes both ways. To us, that's huge.
I think that the colleges are really overrun. So finding placements is a job in itself. And now having to also take the time out of their day and validate all these documents, determine, is there a risk in accepting this medical exemption? Does this meet our agreement? There's so many factors to consider. With us taking that work off of the college, they can just primarily focus on securing placement. So I think it's a beautiful partnership that we have. And then we also just love holding the students' hands, so to speak. So, being a part of their placement journey, because it's so stressful. And being nurses, we've all been through this ourselves too. So it's kind of nice we have that. We see the other side of the spectrum because we remember when we were students going through it ourselves. So
you're bang on. I know the colleges, it takes a lot of time to arrange all these placements to make sure that the students, when they finish their program, they slide right into their placement hours, which for our PSW program is 400 hours. And they need to get in there, get that work done. A big part of the program is someone inside one of those placements signing off that student has empathy, has all the skills, but also has the empathy to do the job that's needed in long-term care or home care. And often they have to set up 2 placements. It is a significant amount of work. But there's also a pressure to it because we've got students that are coming back into the workforce, taking a risk of 6 months off to train, trying to figure out the finances of that. So you got to get the placement lined up. So you do take a pressure off one end of the system for them, which is very, very helpful. And you help to ensure they're meeting the privacy regulations in the different provinces that we're operating in. So I appreciate both of you joining me today. We've actually had 4 of us here today. My dog joined for part of the podcast, which Vasco and Krystin can see, but you can't all. But I appreciate you being here and your support of NAC and what we're trying to do. And I think with that, we'll sign off for this edition of the Edup Canada podcast. And we look forward to being back on the air with all of you next Wednesday. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Edup Canada podcast. We release new episodes regularly, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you know when they are officially out. If you love this episode, please leave a 4 or 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts, so that others can also discover how a set of skills can lead to success. Thanks for learning with us.